Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm in Budapest and I'm standing in front of this terrific statue of Franz Liszt. I think he's meant to be playing the piano. He's sort of playing air piano. The piano isn't visible, but his fingers are moving around as if on some imaginary keyboard. Interesting thing about Liszt is he's a person who has a legendary status as a pianist, and rightly so. He was a prodigiously extraordinary pianist, and you can tell how extraordinary he was by looking at his music or listening to pieces like the Transcendental Etudes, which are so phenomenally difficult that very few pianists in the 19th century except Liszt could play them. Nevertheless, by 1847, when he was only 35, he had given up being a piano virtuoso. He had decided to stop living the life of a touring virtuoso. He'd been going all around Europe. He had a kind of rock star-like celebrity, but by 35 he'd had enough. It's almost like, the Beatles or whatever. There comes this point where the rock star life is no longer able to, you can't really sustain it, so you have to move on to something else. So Liszt actually spent the bulk of his long life teaching here in Budapest, conducting, and of course composing amazing music. So most of his life was not lived as a traveling virtuoso. Nevertheless, that's how we think of him today. I'm standing outside the Liszt Museum in Budapest, and it's an extraordinary building because it used to be the Liszt Academy in the old days, and up on that first floor there where you can see those arched windows is where Liszt used to live at the end of his life. That was his apartment in the final decade of his life. So it's kind of an extraordinary place to be, the place where the grand old man himself used to hang out. So here I am in the Liszt Museum, and this lovely room that we're in is part of Liszt's apartment where he lived in the final decade of his life, in the 1880s, right at the end of his life, in the middle of Budapest. And the apartment is in the middle of the old academy which he had founded. But he liked, always wanting to be at the centre of things, he lived here in the middle of it, on the first floor of the academy. You can see outside the main street with traffic going past. And we're just looking at this wonderful desk here, working desk, which Liszt used to compose at. And I know as a composer myself that I have my own desk, and I have an electric keyboard wired up to the computer. Well, Liszt's arrangement wasn't entirely dissimilar. He had the special desk built for him. It doesn't have strings inside, it has metal plates, and when you touch this little keyboard in the middle, you can trigger the sound. It's an extraordinary piece of technology from the 1880s. Now, Blanca here is very kindly going to show us the sound. I'm not allowed to touch it, but Blanca can give us a demonstration of the beautiful sound it makes. It's really something, it's very magical. I think it's charming that Blanca chose to play a piece of Haydn rather than a piece of Liszt. That must be some sort of protest, I think. This is a very special place because here in the corner of this room in the Liszt Museum in Budapest, this is Liszt's actual apartment at the end of his life. And here we have, it is in fact a replica but a very precise replica of the bed that Liszt slept in this room. Behind it is the actual curtain that Liszt had on the wall behind his bed. And we know that because there's a picture just over there, but we won't look at it now, from a newspaper of the time which shows the details of the room exactly as they are here. But look at this is extraordinary. Here is the praying desk where Liszt used to pray, and you can see his rosary. The crucifix is the same as the crucifix that he prayed in front of. Over here is the certificate of his holy order that he received when he became Abbé Liszt in 1865, after the death of his daughter Blandine, and after the Pope had refused to allow him to marry Princess Wittgenstein, who he was hoping to marry. So in a very sad state, actually, he took holy orders, and there was a period when he withdrew from public life and contemplated becoming a monk, but he took holy orders. And then here we've got some little Sacred Heart emblems that Liszt had inside his coat. So isn't that extraordinary? And over here there's a kind of icon-like picture that he also had in this room. So these are all fascinating and really intriguing signs of his devoutness at the end of his life. Here is a wonderful instrument. It's a little bell piano that he kept in his Rome apartment, not here actually in Budapest, but in Rome, and also the wonderful Bostonian piano over here, a Chickering grand piano, which he also kept in Rome. Liszt apparently called that piano his lion, and this little piano was his puppy. And he used this one for tuning the pianos in the apartment. We're now in the salon of the Liszt Museum in Budapest. This is part of Liszt's original apartment here, and you can see the other rooms through there. There are only 3 large rooms, the dining room in the middle with the Chickering piano, and then the far room is his bedroom. Here we are in the salon, and then there's a door here that goes through to the concert hall. And here are Liszt's 2 pianos that he had in the apartment. A Chickering from Boston, which is a precursor to the modern Steinway. It was a company that merged with Steinway later, and was a magnificent piano and has a fantastic sound. And the Bosendorfer over here, Liszt's favourite piano, is, so these 2 pianos lived side by side in this room as they are now. And look at this, over the top of the piano, we've got Liszt's extraordinary sort of celebrity music stand, which was given to him by various people whose names are all inscribed on the stand itself. And you can see in the middle of it is Liszt's portrait engraved in the centre with a sort of angel above it, and then around him he's got these kind of godlike figures. There's Beethoven at the top, and then to the right you've got Weber, surprisingly, but I mean not in the 19th century. Weber was considered a sort of progenitor of Romanticism, the great godfather of German romantic opera. And then to the left we've got Franz Schubert, and Schubert of course is no surprise in the sense that Liszt loved Schubert's music, but Schubert was a less famous figure in the 19th century. It's very much, it seems to me, this is Liszt's personal collection of gods. And there they are on top of the music stand with the sort of candles around it. Really marvellous, sitting on top of his piano. This is where Liszt used to give masterclasses, and his students used to come and receive free lessons here, and then the audience would sit over this side of the room. But then after the masterclass was over, they would sit and play cards. And you can see here, this device on the table is a card press, which was used to just flatten the cards so that they weren't curly during the game. And there's a written account that I've just been shown by one of his students that although Liszt used to call the sessions jeux sérieux, It was quite the opposite of that. There was a lot of laughing, and his students used to use all sorts of shenanigans in order to enable Liszt to always win at the end of the evening. So that's quite funny. And then behind all of this, you have these different bits of furniture which all have these incredibly elaborate embroidery that were done by noble ladies of Hungary. And you can see their coats of arms on the magnificent upholstery of each chair. The colour here is the original, this lovely turquoise colour, peacock blue, which is the same blue as this magnificent wallpaper. And over here, famous oil painting of Liszt as a young man, looking every bit the rock star that he was, the 1830s star of Europe as a travelling virtuoso. And over here, a less famous but really interesting portrait of Liszt looking a little bit like Kirk Douglas in middle age and standing with his grand black cape. Here is a fascinating instrument. It's a hybrid instrument with a harmonium at the front and a piano at the back. So it's a mix of piano and harmonium, so you can play a sort of melodic, sustained melodic thing at the top and have a piano underneath, or vice versa. You've got harmonium bellows and you've got piano pedals that are sort of at their side, so Liszt had to push that with his foot that way. But it was an instrument he knew quite well because he had one in Weimar. Very complex, it's like a sort of synthesizer of the 1880s. And over the top, you've got two pictures that have been in this apartment since Liszt lived here by his friend Doré, the famous French artist, illustrator and engraver. Here on the left, you've got a scene from Dante's Inferno, and of course Liszt had written the Dante Symphony and the Dante Sonata. And over on this side, you've got St. Francis walking on the water. This is the subject of Liszt's wonderful second legend for piano, which is an extraordinary, colourful piece about St. Francis walking on the water. So here's something really extraordinary. Here we are in Liszt's apartment. We're in the salon. Behind us are the pianos where masterclasses were given. This is very much the engine room of Liszt's life, really, as an old man when he was teaching. And he famously had this sort of collection of disciples, or, well, students, but they were almost like disciples, this very, very close-knit group. They would masterclass in here. They would come through that door over there, behind these people. And they come into the room, and then on a Saturday, and here's the extraordinary thing, Blanca's going to unlock the door, and you'll see how Liszt's private apartment then, on a Saturday, opens out into the public sphere. This is so typical of Liszt somehow. Look at this. You walk out of the apartment and into this extraordinary, huge room. The painting over the top of the stage is apparently an original painting, and the screens around it are a replica of the acoustic screens that Liszt had around the stage. Originally there was an organ as well as a piano on the stage. Here are the actual seats that were once in here. Imagine that, like great pews. And outside, of course, you've got the street. But isn't that a magnificent thing to have a concert hall attached to your apartment? Yes, hello, my friend, yes. We're on camera, I think, yes. It's always fascinating being in an environment where a great artist once lived. There's something amazing about that. I once went to Maurice Ravel's wonderful house at Montfort-l'Amaury, just to the west of Paris. And that was also a fabulous experience, seeing the rooms where Ravel once lived. It gives you an insight into the psychology and the culture around a composer in a very deep way. You get this personal insight that you don't get unless you visit these places. And the thing that really came across in the Liszt apartment was the sense that while he was a man of his time, you could see this in the corner of Liszt's bedroom, for example, where there's this late 19th century bed and the drapes and the area where he prayed in front of the rosary and the image of Christ and so on. There is very much a sense of the era in that corner of the bedroom. On the other hand, you've got this man surrounded by all kinds of high-tech gadgetry. The composing desk with the keyboard that's installed into the desk is an incredibly modern thing. As is the little bell piano that he's got in the corner, this funny little tinkly thing. This is before the invention of the Celesta. You've got the wonderful pre-Steinway Bostonian piano and the Bosendorfer. So those two pianos that he has in his salon are the precursors of the great modern concert grands. And you'll remember there's a hybrid Piano-Harmonium, which is almost like a modern synthesizer. And then perhaps most modern of all, that sense of interfacing with the public as if it's just part of your life. We live in an era when that goes on all the time. I'm doing it now in a way. I'm in my house, but I'm public facing. And that's what Liszt was doing in his salon. He's greeting people all the time. He had a kind of open house between 3 and 4 on Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays. Anyone could come in and see him. Very generous, actually. And then that wonderful thing, which you may have seen in one of the last videos, where the door opened out from the salon literally into the concert hall, into his private concert hall, where the public would come and listen on a Saturday to Liszt's students performing. So it's a fascinating insight into a great artist who's also a great educator and has this sort of private-public interface going on in his chambers. Really fascinating.